Welcome, 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 everyone, to another episode of Native Paranormal Crossroads podcast. We are joined today by the Paranormal Rangers themselves and Dr. Jim Segala. We're going to be having an incredible show talking about the paranormal world and understanding science and everything about it. But right now, we have some exciting news to everyone. The Native Paranormal Crossroads has a tour coming up. Michelle, would you like to give everyone some specifics about the tour?
Absolutely. We are very excited for this wonderful tour that we're going to be going on. It's called the Paranormal Rangers Training Tour, April 20th to the 23rd. Navajo journalist and the newest member, Michele Meiners, myself, and Navajo's own Paranormal Rangers, Stanley Milford and Jonathan Dover of Netflix Unsolved Mysteries fame, are coming to York, United Kingdom for the first time. They will be hosting a 4-day event, most honored haunted places using their forensic based investigative skills into the paranormal. This is an exciting opportunity to meet them face to face as they will be passing on their skills during the 2 full days of training at the hotel there in Mercure in York, and 2 days of the field practicing newly acquired skills from the indoor training. As part of the tour, you will get to go to deathly dark tours on 2 consecutive evenings around York's most ancient ghostly venues. Locally awarded winning deathly dark tours are led by Dorian, a well published spooky tour guide who will take this private tour to little known and well known places of paranormal ill repute. Here you can practice with the thermal camera, body camera, tri-field meter, and night vision goggles, which are included in the price of the package. The Paranormal Rangers give to you to take home. Once you invested in this training, you can use the equipment to work alongside your daily practice, integrating technology and lifestyle. By using the technology to help you interact with the unseen, for example, you could use your night vision goggles to detect orbs or use the tri-field meter to record how your environment changes your prayers or your ceremonies. The thermal camera, you can use it to your outdoor fire, and the body camera you could use to record your revocations of your out loud name to claim its voice. See how you can change your environment with this technology and how it will enhance your journey of the living the mystical life daily. The Paranormal Rangers training tour, the price is uh, in pounds, 3,500. This amazing 4-day package includes transportation to and from York, lunch, teas, and coffee during the day. Just note, if you are wanting to combine the tour with a 3-day combined healing therapy system package, we're offering a special reduced rate for both 5,600 euros, which is saving about 1,650 if you're looking for an inclusive hotel, breakfast, lunch, and dinner rate for the 7 days of to joint venture with the paranormal and combined healing. Please let us know. This will be added cost of about 1,400. That's a lot to say about the tour.
Well, the best part of the tour is you guys get to take technology home. You're going to get a thermal camera, night vision goggles, body camera with high 4K camera and audio, a tri-field meter. How often would you ever buy that stuff for yourself? You're going to get all that to take home with you. The training, how to use it, and then the field training in one of the hauntedest cities in the United Kingdom. And then you get to integrate it. How does your reality change from your meditation? What does the thermal camera tell you about yourself going through your daily activities? Learning how to apply the Paranormal Rangers experience and techniques from law enforcement to investigating your own self. Great opportunities. And for those that want to do the connective healing tour with it, it's another way to expand your daily practice, your daily living, and how you can grow and integrate these experiences and these teachings into bettering your life. Stan, would you like to add anything, or John?
Well, I can add this that both me and Stan are former law enforcement officers at the federal level in the United States. We have a combined total experience of 54 years of law enforcement background. We have also 22 years of combined experience investigating paranormal cases involving UFOs, hauntings, Bigfoot, and Navajo skinwalkers. So there's a lot of information that we can pass on to you. We have also been teaching for the last 4 years at the Mutual UFO Network boot camp in Arizona. And we're scheduled to be teaching for a fifth year.
Wonderful. Stan, anything you want to add?
Well, just that I'm really looking forward to being directly involved in this project and sharing the information that we all have uh, to those that are interested in this subject matter and this type of work. So it's really exciting. Yeah.
Wonderful. And Joel, can you put up the link to the website so people can go and see all their information about and be able to purchase it right there if they'd like to? All righty. Laura, would you like to add anything on the at all here before we move on?
No, I think it's all going to be very exciting. We're combining your tour of the Paranormal Rangers with what we do in York, which is our combined healing therapies. So there's also, I think, as Michele mentioned, there's a possibility if you'd like to come and have 3 days of combined therapy healing along with the tour, then we're offering that special rate that was quoted. There will be an email going out very shortly, but meanwhile, anybody who wants to book or you want more information, please email me, Laura Two Feathers with the number 2 at gmail.com. I think Joe will probably put that up there as well. Really
Wonderful.
looking forward to that.
With that being said, let's start the Native Paranormal Crossroads podcast featuring Dr. Jim Segala. Dr. Segala, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Very good. And really, I appreciate you inviting me. What you said about this retreat is amazing. I am so glad to hear that you understand that there's a lot of physics or physical things going on around your environment and that you're giving away, that you're including equipment in to read this. That really sends a happiness to my heart.
We want to empower people with the science and the consciousness of spirit. And we've got to come to a determination where science and spirit no longer fight, but shake hands and agree. We have to at least agree somewhere to work together. And that's where the future lies, when science and spirit works together, not against each other.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, Michele and I, just to give you a little background, Michele and I have been working together for 5 years now. And it became very aware that Michele was very into the spiritual side and I'm very into the science side. And it wasn't any success separately as much as success together. So when we started to do things, when we thought about both aspects, the science and the spiritual together linked, that's when we started to understand things and start really having great success.
Yeah. In our combined healing therapies, we use the science of all the healing technologies: hyperbaric chamber, flotation tank, pulse electromagnetic therapy, hypnagogic lights, and cranial sacral therapy. All sciences that all have a spiritual result in changing of people.
Yes.
And people changing their environment. And when science met technology, we created a unique system. And now we have this investigative part to add to it, which just expands everything.
That's wonderful.
So, Dr. Segala, how did you get yourself involved into this type? Where did it start from you?
Well, it was started in a very weird spot. In fact, Michele was instrumental in this whole thing. So I worked for a gentleman named Dr. Hal Puthoff many years ago as a scientist, a pure scientist, just doing basic research into some of the advanced energies and things like that. He was a science member, or he was a board member, science board member for areas of the country that had very high paranormal activity. And one of the owner of the property had an injury on that property and called Hal up and said, we need to get some scientists up there because we have no idea why these injuries are occurring, and we're very nervous about that. And like I said, Michele was actually involved in that at that time. That was my first exposure to the things that can happen to a human that can't be explained with straight engineering or science. So that's when I started to really understand that there's something going on, something underneath that's going on that's affecting human beings. And then I started hearing things about, this ability to experience, ability to have sensations that are not things that you would normally find. And so that was my first entry into this whole thing, was going back to where it actually boots on the ground, seeing it in real life right in front of me going on. So that was my exposure. That's how I got involved.
Wow.
For me and John, being law enforcement, having gone through the Federal Police Academy, you're taught the basics of investigation and scientific investigation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, just like in your situation, where we were part of a Native American tribe, and so we were right in the middle of that. In law enforcement, in your investigations, you take certain procedures and techniques that you apply, but that in some cases that would only go so far. And then with the paranormal, and then on the other side, you have the teachings of, let's say, your medicine men and your spiritual people, shaman, that are guiding you on the other side. So for us, it was just like what Andrew mentioned. It's the bringing together of both of those sides into one, where you have a much clearer understanding of these phenomena.
Yeah, I think the mistake that a lot of people make, and I'm actually happy they're making it, because that gives a lot of room for you guys to go and make some inroads, is that they don't understand that it's both sides. They think it's purely physical or purely spiritual, and they miss the whole connection there. So, and you're 100% correct. So when you do an investigation, I'm sure the police have or law enforcement has the same. You do it evidence-based, right? Everything is like evidence points to the next thing. You never really deviate from that. But what you find is that you don't have enough information to get to the next step if you just consider just the physical evidence. That's right. When you have to say, okay, let's look for other things that might be happening in the environment, in that are not something that you can measure or you can put your finger on. And that's where the spiritual side comes in.
Right.
So you're hit it exactly on the head.
When science and law enforcement and spirit work together, the things that can be uncovered. The oddness of this little pot, this Native Paranormal Crossroads here, we are at the crossroads where a whole new section of perception can be opened up for people. The actual techniques from a law enforcement, the techniques from science, and the techniques for spirits to do what? Help the experiencer experience more.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I find with the people that I've worked with now, Michele and I had worked with many people in this area, and that one of the things that I was trying to conquer was this ability to give them this confidence that they can do their everyday life without being scared of the experiences. A lot of people get scared of these things, and it ends up being something that they have trouble going through their normal day lives. It's because they don't it's like walking into a room, a dark room that you've never been in before, and you don't know what's going to happen. But if you know something about the room, it's much easier to do that, and you're willing to go through there. So these people are not willing to go out in their car because they're afraid that it might happen to them while they're driving, or they go into some catatonic state during some really bad, very bad situation. So that's what we try to uncover for these people, give them the confidence that they can live their normal life and accept this stuff and be able to just make this part of their normal life.
Jim, part of our teachings as we're moving forward with this particular tour and podcasts and, and our website is to convey to people that being in the dark room doesn't necessarily mean it is a fearful event. And one of the teachings that we're trying to engage in with the audience is that we have been dealing with this for a long time, millennia. This is part of our culture. These are part of our teachings. And we want to let them know that we need to interact with the unseen world as well. And people conjecture, they come up with these feelings of not being able to cope with their situation, and so they put themselves in a state of a fear-based, life, instead of one of transforming their lives to be with the unforeseen world. There might be something or a message that needs to be given them in order to have their lives move forward.
That's really true. So one of the things that we did a study. Michele and I were instrumental in doing a study that lasted about 3 years. One of the important things that we learned from this is that people were really interested in understanding why they're having these experiences. Is there somebody talking to them or giving them information that they just don't speak that particular language? They have no idea what that message is. So those are the kind of things that we're trying to help these people understand and give them the confidence to listen better, or maybe back up a little. Every time you come to a hard problem, the best way to approach it is sometimes just to back up and just take a breath. They give them the ability to do that. I think that was super important for these people.
And
many are taught, in how they've been raised, just like Michele said earlier, that automatically you go into a state of fear simply because it's something that's unknown.
Right.
And for John and I, in a lot of the cases that we dealt with, that's not a good thing. To actually, by showing fear and having those thoughts and that energy about you, these things would actually feed upon that energy that you're projecting, and it would manipulate, and in some cases I think it would actually amplify or give it power to act and do things against you and stuff. So John and I, we had gotten to the point where our background was doing tactical operations and SWAT and that kind of work, and in the training in from that background, you don't give in to those fears. You control any type of fear going into an unknown situation, and use that to your advantage. And so, yeah, we adapted some of those techniques and abilities as we went into these other types of investigation and stuff.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned this whole amplification thing, and that's one of the theories that came out of the study that we conducted. Is that it's great that they've got all these TV shows now with all these Skinwalker and all these kind of things.
Yeah,
all this lure and stuff like that. But what we found out, it's not really the places; it's the people that interact with the places. And what happens is that you get this amplification when somebody with experienced capabilities, or that has been trained, or however that person attained this ability, goes to those places. That's when you start seeing all the crazy stuff happening. But if everybody leaves, it's like everything. It's just a piece of dirt at that point. There's still the amplification possibility is there, maybe whatever is causing it, but you really have to interact with the property in order to happen. So, I mean, like when Michele would go to these places, they go to some places and you don't get anything, but you go to other places and all of a sudden there's this big energy going on, and all of a sudden, a lot of things are happening. So it points to the fact that the phenomena, whatever it is very localized to certain areas, and that's where people interact with them.
Yeah, one of the things that we've always told our students, and we tell them, a great man once said, can you look at a situation without naming it? Naming it, making it a word, causes fear.
That's right.
So
That's exactly
you don't name it, and that's what we try to do. It's difficult sometimes when things are going crazy around you, but you don't give into that fear. You don't name it, and you just go on and you do your job, because they always say that somebody has to do that job, and if you don't do it, then what are you hanging around there for?
That's very good. I like
Very
that.
good. So the equation for amplification, what makes it work? In my perception, it is the right person in the right frequency with the right DNA that matches the frequency of the land that will amplify a specific frequency of time, space to create the locality event. It remains a non local event until there is an alignment of DNA, which is consciousness, broadcasting through the many layers of perception of the layered world we work in. We know that Bigfoot and other entities operate outside our realm of vision. Outside of our realm of vision is another realm, and that realm can come into a harmony like a barbershop quartet or an orchestra working together to create an amplification of uniqueness that creates the locality event, the localized event of rapid expansion.
That's well said.
Okay?
Yeah, I mean that theory is like exactly the premise that we went forward with in our study.
So the next part is, how do we show people that you can study it? I understand you've come up with a device, your MooPass device. Can you explain some of that, how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So it started out knowing that the original injury that I investigated with, I don't know, Michelle, is it all right to mention the people that I worked with? Is that cool for this place?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Dr. Green, Dr. Kit Green, I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's a really good forensic neurologist that has a really good handle on understanding what happens to people in situations like that. And so anyway, so my work with him on this particular injury showed us that some physical damage happened when this person had this very large experience. Some physical damage happened to the person concurrently as it was happening. He was injured by this particular experience, which means that it's something physical. There's some physical change in the environment, whether it's some signal or it's something. So then we went off, and this is well before well before a lot of the things happened. It was just my initial part of this. And I said, well, wouldn't it be really good in a scientific manner to measure that signal, which is had to be significantly large. I mean, it had to be a very large signal to happen. What if I, at the same time that person realized that they were having this experience, also measured these signals in the environment concurrently, two separate points of data, and then had those two correlated? And of course, you can't do that. It's like trying to be on the corner when an accident happens, right? You can't possibly have it. You don't have your camera out. But if you leave devices out in a in the background and just record all the time, just have it sit there and record like your tri-field meter. Well, we said, let's make a tri-field meter that we can put into a little thing and just have it sit there, record and record and record. But at the same time, record from these people on a day-to-day basis what they're doing and how they feel and whatever experience they have. Marry those together, and now you can have a correlation between what's happening in the environment, whether it's all the different channels that could possibly happen, and what's happening with the person, all the possible things that can possibly happen to the person. Marry those together. Once you do that, mathematics has given us the ability to find patterns very easily. Like, math is great at doing that. And then once you have those patterns, establish those patterns, then you can start making, I don't want to call it predictions because that's the wrong word. You can get senses of how things are going with that particular person, when things are heating up, when things are cooling down, and give the person a feeling that there's probably going to be, good stuff going on for the next couple of weeks, or, there's some, you're tending towards a bad thing. And that's the data that we collected over the 3 years. And that's what we had that's what our devices had gathered. So the device is very simple. It's just a collection of little scientific sensors that we house in a like a little enclosure that sits in some part of their house, and it just collects data, and it just looks for all different, like a big microwave spike or a big gamma ray spike, or all the things that trifilm meters measure, or something in the IR spectrum or something like that. It just does it continuously, and it just marries that to what's going on in your environment. So we have that data constantly is coming in, and data from the people are constantly coming in. So you get this correlation between the two, which really gives you the ability to mathematically figure out, well, what's going on, what's going to be happening with them in the very near future. So that's what these devices do.
It's interesting, Jim, because the earlier devices were designed for the environment and not necessarily for the person. And what we were finding through our predictive correlation to these patterns is we always thought we had to be on site of the property that these occurrences were happening. And so we were getting negative and positive response when we were in certain areas of the Uinta Basin. And that was really interesting because some areas were causing medical issues, some areas were healing those medical issues. And I was one of those participants. And when I was talking to Jim in the early days of this program, I was the why. Why is this happening? Why am I dealing with this? Why are they visiting with me? Why am I getting sick? Why am I, so there was a lot of variations there that I needed answer as a participant myself. And then we started to see these correlations. And Jim, I'm going to let you tell the story when we were with one of our participants up at Blind Frog Ranch. And Dwayne's very open to us advertising for his show as well as his ranch, of the positive things that were happening in his environment.
Yeah, it's one of the things that unfortunately I don't have the abilities that Michele has, or other people that I met. They're in I might have them, but because of my engineering degrees and my science degrees, I think that I just been programmed all my life to think rationally. So unfortunately, I don't have those abilities, but I spend a lot of time standing next to people that have these experiences, so I can gather what they're feeling, how they're feeling. So we were at Blind Frog Ranch, and I with another person, which is a really very powerful, just like Michele, very powerful experience, sir. And all of a sudden, we were in an area, and then it got super quiet. I mean, one of those things where the kind of place where we are, there is so much wildlife. There's crickets, there's birds, there's all of a sudden it just went dead quiet. And I never experienced anything like that before. It just went dead quiet. It was like that for maybe 3 or 4 minutes. And then it all of a sudden came back again. So that's the kind of thing where I say, okay, now I now I understand what happens to people when they experience, because I didn't get an experience, but I experienced what the environment did. All of a sudden, there was no sound whatsoever. So if we happen to have a device at that point, you would see that you had normal noise, and all of a sudden, bam, it would go to zero. And that's a significant correlation. Now, if they actually put in there that, by the way, my ears started ringing and there was absolutely no noise in the environment. Now that's that's a scientific data point that's very reliable that can be put into a very good statistical model. So kind of scared the crap out of me, but
I got a little bit to add here. We were talking before about the person that experienced on the Uinta Basin, and it also, things come through in extremely low frequencies, especially when they're coming from places like the Uinta Basin that has multiple layers of underground realities. It doesn't matter what those layers are, they exist. And those frequencies are trying to disrupt time, space, location here. And if something is specifically looking at a form of DNA that has a form of awareness that can tune into another realm, they are creating a counter disruptive frequency at the low frequency level to prevent them from tuning in and observing other worlds, which has been a common practice of the other layers of reality who do not want humans' curiosity looking into their places and spaces. Okay? And then you were talking about the person and the internal weather patterns that they might have post experience and how to help them deal with it. And then the dead quiet. People have been experiencing this in the jungle since the dawn of people going into the jungles and the deserts and everywhere. And that dead quiet is a cross realm, like sonar ping, is a metaphor, pausing the reactive life force within the state of perception. That energy tells anything that's a living life force, stop reacting for that period of time,
Mhm.
because what's from the other realm is focusing on a consciousness here in expansion. And
That's
expansion
interesting.
can be up, down, negative, positive. It doesn't matter what direction this expansion is in.
That's very interesting.
And then they'll
S-
determine if they want to put it on pause or hit it
Yeah.
with a counter frequency to amplify or de-amplify.
See, that's what when we set out to do this, we said that we don't know exactly what the energies are, what channels the energy are. They might be in the electromagnetic spectrum, they might be in the sound spectrum, they might be, in the higher gamma ray spectrum, or they just might be in the magnetic spectrum, shaking the earth. We don't know what it is. So the devices that we put together reads everything at one time and it marries everything. So we get a reading of all the channels continuously all day long. And they get channeled to a spot where they get married to the person, and not just the person now. So what I've been doing lately is saying, what is going on? And you mentioned weather. So we also map in what the weather is doing at the exact moment. What's the barometric pressures? What's the news in the local area? What's the social media saying in the local area? Mapping all that stuff in to understand what's going on, because you start seeing these patterns, and once you see a pattern, then you can extrapolate. If you don't see a pattern, you can never extrapolate and figure out what's going on next or where you came from. And
Are
again,
solar
this
flares in that recognition, that area of recognition?
absolutely, because those solar flares, what they do is they hit the atmosphere and they develop gammas, and gamma particles are picked up by the device, and we get. And of course, when I was doing my postdocs, I worked a lot in the radiation oncology area. So I know, I mean, a lot. My PhD was all in biophysics and understanding how energy affects matter, and especially specifically brain matter. So I know that when you treat somebody with these high energy particles, like you would get from a solar flare, they then create these. It gets into your brain, and they start creating these. It could be euphoric, or it could be a fright, or something like that. They start imagining things. So just to give you an example, I've used this before. That we were treating a patient, and they after the treatment, they were so mad at us because they said, "You guys were having a party while I was in there getting treatments. I smelled pizza, I heard music, I heard dancing. Of course, we were doing that, but your brain acts a certain way. So when you get these particles from the atmosphere down to your, within your body, and your brain absorbs them, you don't know what neurons fire to actually create something. So, yeah, so that's actually something significant.
So a lot of people experience intensified dreams during solar flares, very intensified dreams, or lack of inability to go to sleep or stay asleep. Very
Yeah.
common thing. Something else for solar flares, that's a beyond Earth realm connecting to this realm. It is the realm of the sun. It's an unknown realm for us, other than the old prayers and religions that still acknowledge it. It's another realm and another state of consciousness, influencing us with photonic and magnetic and protonic particles that are all forms of light. And consciousness without the body is just light. The light comes into the body as a manifestation of localized time space to create history, time, culture, and all those things that beings of infinite light come into a finite world to experience. The uniqueness of each and every world. And there are times those solar flares go through maximums and minimums. As a scientist, what do the maximums, the solar maximums, mean that are coming up to us? The increased solar flares, where you go from none to hundreds of them.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's a lot of people that study that kind of thing, and they study patterns of, how the sun is actually creating its energy and things like that, and why that happens in certain aspects. And there really isn't a lot of scientific understanding of why that happens. It's just that it's manifesting. It's right. You got all this energy bouncing around. But you make a really good point. Maybe it's something that's controlled by some other agency that we don't understand. It's very possible okay, if you want to kind of move off the normal a little bit and say, if you had the ability to create these particles, say if you were a being and you had these abilities to create these particles, the particle creation creates a lot of it creates a lot of situations down on the planet that might be interesting to observe, that you might use that for generating these things. I mean, that sound kind of crazy, but that's very possible that somebody else is controlling the valve and turning it on and off at their will to create some experiment they're doing on us.
I like to call our bodies DNA skin suits of awareness. Okay? The DNA is a skin suit of awareness, and we are an instrument of awareness also. Sensing instrument and musical instrument. A bilocating, manifesting duality frequency that started as a singularity but manifested in a collective time-space agreement. To do what? Share the unique experience of this place and space and time that is ever evolving.
John and I, having done the career in law enforcement for as many years as we did, for that length of time, you could see the correlations between criminal activity and the full moon and these kind of things that were quite pronounced for us. You could pretty much set your watch to it, that things are going to get switched on at a certain point, and so, but the idea that there could be an outside force that might be manipulating those kind of things to affect, let's say, certain parties within the human race or whatever, it's very interesting.
Or a haunted ranch.
The original injury,
thousands of them across the world.
Yeah.
That were just built on very unique places.
Yeah.
So the original injury that I investigated, back a few years ago, the person that reported it or the person that got injured felt that they were being challenged or they're being instructed because somebody wanted to understand something about the way that they do things, that they were being tested. So that leads you to there's some higher intelligence that's controlling how this person is and we actually found out that it was high energy particles that actually created this, because the injuries were pointed right at that. I mean, there was no way to say it wasn't. So anyway, so who's controlling that valve? Who's making that happen? That's the interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, John and I.
Go ahead. I was going to say in my past life, after I got out of law enforcement, I worked for a medical manufacturing company, and we had these fans that you would put on the stand there and it blow on the product, and they pulsed both negative and positive ions. And so these fans were like $600 a piece. And the people in the room, they would use them as personal air conditioning fans and have it blow in their face.
And ions were smashing into their face?
Yeah, they actually had it blowing right on them. And
good for them.
We started seeing people that had flu symptoms, and they'd get sore throats, and they'd get angry at little things, and it really affected their whole personality. And when I started researching it, because I was doing maintenance and calibration, I found out that this was an effect of positive ions. Mm-hmm. And this is the same effect for everybody out there, that when you have this full moon effect, you have what they call lunatics, which are people that are affected by this.
Sure.
And it creates positive ions in the atmosphere. And when you breathe positive ions, it causes something in the body that will create all these symptoms, flu-like symptoms, and a general feeling of malaise and just all this. And I would tell people in the room, don't put that fan in your face, put it on the product, and your headaches will go away. And sure enough, they started doing that, and it did.
Yeah.
And I went to the health commission over there, I guess, uh, uh, and environmental health, I guess is what they call it. And I mentioned it to them, and they said, "Well, there's not enough study that's done on it, so we don't have enough information." And I pointed them to documented papers. If you look up negative reaction of positive ions, you'll find all these major colleges that did studies on this that
Sure.
found out, yeah, there is a major reaction to this. And so you shouldn't be breathing these positive ions because they go right into your bloodstream, they go right into your brain. And so it was a real lesson, I guess. And I kind of wonder if we have some of the same stuff going on, maybe in greater concentrations in some of these areas too.
Well, to that point, I'm sure everybody knows that our brains work by the travel of ions down actins. I mean, that's how it works. So when you start adding other fields in the mix, things do happen. So, like on, for instance, when you have, so sometimes, like if you rub your feet on the ground, right, or you rub your feet on a carpet, we have wool socks on. All the electrons will gather and they'll come outside your body. And you'll have all these excess electrons. Then you hit somebody behind the ear. Same thing. So all of these ions are out there. They're gathering, and it's very possible that when you have some kind of, if you have a weather or maybe it's lightning or something like that, you get these signals that don't normally happen to you. Your brain interprets those as regular signals. It manifests some kind of feelings inside of you, which creates these feelings or these sensations that you're getting, and it kicks off kicks off things. So, but what I'm saying is that I think it's a little bit farther than that, because what I think is happening is that you have these signals that you're getting have information in it. There's actually, somebody's not just sending you these raw signals, just bouncing them off you. There's actually signals in there. So your brain is interpreting this thing. So sometimes if you hear voices or you hear whatever, something, you imagine an orb, or you see a character or something like that, it's because some entity might have created these signals that your brain then receives, and it kicks off maybe a memory, or it kicks off something that puts the image in your forebrain.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what happened to some of the patients that we worked with back in a few years ago on the ranch area.
Well, Jim, it was really interesting being the Uinta Basin, and they call it the bowl, because you've got, on one hand, you've got Dinosaur National Park that have uncovered ancient bones, which has radiation spectrum there of these particular ions, and then you've got the weather patterns from the White Sands Missile Range that they set off those bombs, and so there's this jet stream mixing with this uranium and other elements, that can create those type of environments, and then people are affected. Rather, it could be a positive day, it could be a negative day, and there was a high incidence of those medical things that people were encountering, from cancer, stomach ailments, mental issues, so on and so forth, play a lot into what you're saying. I call them pheromones for the body, because we're being, adjusted in the way we deal with our daily lives. And you said that earlier, how's this affecting the daily lives of the participants? And then what's really fascinating, after we would feel that, people would start witnessing encounters of UFO sightings, Sasquatch, other phenomena. I found that was a really interesting correlation to the study that we were doing, including myself. I don't want to, bring that out, that I did have those experiences in this particular area where I'm now home and things are calm. Yeah, but there is a term too called hitchhikers that we can get into here in a little bit. But so what I'm saying is, does like you're saying, these interaction with these ions, do they also create those kind of sightings in an area that's concentrated where a lot of sightings take place with a lot of people?
Yeah, so I believe that if there's, let's hypothetically say that a UFO does come over, is actually in the environment. They have a certain energy signature. They're pumping out like gobs of energy. We then get that energy in our heads, and we then interpret it. So that they decide whether or not you want to be opened up to see you. You're actually being signaled to say, okay, I'm going to let you see me. Just like they're allowed sometimes, and they'll signal you to like there's a message here that says, how do they turn it off? I don't think the birds stop chirping. I think that you stop listening because your brain is now doing something else. You're giving an instruction. So it's possible that when we were on Blind Friday, we were given the instructions. Our brain was given the instructions to turn off. So it's possible, and it's not a coincidence that a lot of experiencers are the ones that see the UFOs. I don't think it's like how many? It's like way more than statistically possible. So it's very possible.
3 of us at the same time, though, Jim.
I know, right?
That's the phenomena right there.
Right. There's no way that could have happened just
arbitrarily. That's the collective experiencer. The 3 of you were a unique amplification collective. As for the birds turning off, I think they both turn off. Okay? Because the consciousness of yourself tuning them out is one thing, to have clearer vision of a potential communication. But if the actual environment turns off, that's the amplification of the next vision.
Yeah, and all sentient objects are fair game, right?
Yeah.
Who's to say that birds don't have the same abilities? They just can't communicate it.
Right. We just don't know the language.
We don't know their language, right?
Right.
Okay.
That's interesting.
I put something else through here when you're talking about the ships contacting, and it's through the vagus nerve, the bioconscious photons projected from the localized event that translate to the body signal through the central nervous system to have that experience. It is the vagus nerve that is the crossover between the spiritual and the physical, and it's where science and spirit, when they meet and truly understand the vagus nerve and what it can do for conscious awareness people following a scientific and spiritual route, will be the greatest expansion. A whole new set of sciences will be created out of it, is my view.
Sure.
It's
you always called it the superhighway.
Superhighway. That's the information superhighway. It's going from dial up to broadband, to spiritual broadband.
Yeah. So
like when you're tuning into the UFO, that's a different frequency to, say, the birds singing.
Yes.
But eventually we should be able to, we have the body technology to tune into the birds singing and the UFO simultaneously, surely.
Sure, but let's relate it to technology. 25 years ago, no one really knew what 5G was, right?
Yeah.
If the if the UFOs are broadcasting on 5G and none of us even know what 5G is, how do we be aware of it? Through the raising of consciousness, the raising of awareness, and 25 years of history without the fear of 5G melting everyone's brain and turning us into zombies. Which it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're really bringing up a lot of good points here. As far as so one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand is that the human body is probably the best sensor that ever was made. We can pick up anything.
Instrument of experience.
And the problem is that our forebrain, the one up front, the one that's not too bright, doesn't really understand it. It's the subconscious brain that really that gets it all and categorizes it and mushes it up, and then it tells the forebrain, oh, by the way, I think you should be scared right now and stuff like that. Anyway, so we don't know. And there's one argument I've always made is that if nature has something for it to be more conscious and be able to proliferate and to save itself, it will evolve it and make it part of its psyche. So if there was the ability to sense these things that make them a better species, it would definitely put it in our DNA. There's no
It
question
is
about it.
it is in our DNA. That was the natural living aspect of us, the agrarian connected cultures that still used industrialization without losing their agrarian roots.
Sure.
And that natural living is what's missing for the forebrain to complete its caveman into modern man technology with modern consciousness experience. All too often, the cities are the most dirtiest of energies, electromagnetically, photonically, and spiritually, with no active group to clean up the negative energy, so it just gets more toxic and toxic and toxic. But once the forebrain gets reconnected to natural living, whole new states of experience are ready. One of the big things that I talk about is living in the concrete jungle, how to make that forebrain connective experience and make it
Sure.
and be at peace with it.
That's
So,
true.
Jim, in your studies, what is the most bizarre case that you handled today using your technologies and the participation program that you created?
Well, so I think there maybe it was like a dozen instances that really stood out to be like, oh wow, this is crazy. So, and I got to tell you that there was a lot of instances that happened that we had to call in literally law enforcement to. I actually had to provide. The study was so good that I was actually asked to provide information to the FBI because the person that was being affected by this was really being affected by this, and they were the FBI got involved. So, and I was able to give them data to which they could solve the case. But the most interesting one, so those are actually the most profound ones. The most interesting one is a case where somebody was actively participating in our study. They had a device that was giving all sorts of great data. They took a trip up into the Uinta Canyon where they went caving. They pulled out a crystal out of the rock and they brought it home. Once they got home, all hell broke loose on them and the device. There was just readings galore, completely out of the ordinary. They had very bad feelings. They couldn't sleep. There was a lot of bad things going on in their lives. And this lasted like 3 or 4 days. And not just them, but their family members were experiencing this. They brought this crystal back, and they had family members that were not feeling good. They're very, very sick, and not just the people living in the house, but the people that were connected to them, like grandparents and things like that. So what was decided, and I didn't really understand this until well after that, and they took the crystal and returned it back to the original spot where they got it from, and everything returned back to normal within like 2 or 3 days. So now you ask yourself, how the heck could that possibly happen? But if there was something going on, something, and I think Michele can actually answer this a lot better than I can. There's a certain energy that's out there that if you disrupt it, or you're not kind to it, or you're not respectful of it, then that's when the entity kind of comes alive, or I would say the phenomena comes alive and starts making you understand that you did something, bad to me. So maybe Michele, you
Well, those crystals hold energy of memory. So crystals
Oh,
have
they do.
yeah, and so there may be some kind of tied to that crystal being in that certain environment that they disrupted something that held something together. I mean, we're just speculating here, but it was really interesting. There comes the term that I spoke about earlier about hitchhikers. Sometimes we can take physical things that can manifest into our home environments, and then we can call, something spiritual followed me. Yes, true, maybe so. That has to be, investigated. And so we saw a lot of that happening. People would pick up a rock or they pick up a relic. They thought that was wonderful, and things started to happen around their environments, around them. Was there a violation of that area? They weren't supposed to do that, and I've seen this over and over. in the area that we investigated, Jim. And so it was really interesting that the Paranormal Rangers too have had that happen on their cases as they went through their law enforcement career, that they over and over would see this type of behavior, that occurred. But it's really interesting that people don't know how to tie that into that. Maybe they were the amplifier of that particular
That's right.
event.
I think that's actually was right.
Connected. Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
we actually had a case that they were having all kinds of paranormal activity going on at this house,
Hmm.
and it just suddenly started up. And so they called us, and of course I got sent out, and I went out with another officer. The other officer would not get anywhere near the place. Uh, I literally had to grab them by the back of the belt and the collar and kind of push them into the scene. And even then, they recoiled and backed away. What had happened was that uh, I did what they call a class 3 archaeological survey, which is to walk around in a grid pattern around the residence and see if there's any archaeological artifacts there. Because I've seen people actually build their houses on top of a graveyard and
oh,
had a skeleton wash out on their doorstep. So in this case, what we found was a Hogan site or a residence that had been there since maybe the 20s or the 30s. It was really old. And there was a skeleton coming out of the ground in the middle of it, because that's where a lot of people were buried, was in the middle of their houses, and the house was allowed to collapse on itself. What happens is that the kids, being kids, were told to get some wood. So
oh,
they saw the Hogan logs that were all brittle and just desiccated logs, and brought them over and cut them up and put them in the fireplace in the house.
Hmm.
And this precipitated this whole incident. And when I told them about it, I said, we took rocks and we rocked up the remains that were being exposed. Or I should say, I did. The other officer just stayed back. Um, and then I told the family, do not touch that place over there. This is what's causing all your problems, and you're going to need to see somebody spiritual, like a medicine man or a preacher, or somebody, depending on what your background is, to come and do a ceremony to get rid of this bad juju, to use a to
sure.
use a colloquial term. And so that's what they ended up doing. But it was very apparent that something was going on there, and that they had let this energy out that didn't like what they were doing, and was causing all kinds of poltergeist activity there.
Yeah. So I got to tell you that one of the biggest things that I learned from this whole thing is that whatever this energy is, and I call it a phenomena. I think Michele, you also refer to it as this thing. Some people want to give it a name, like you say.
A phenomena. Yeah.
We'll call it a phenomena, but I think that I saw definite evidence that if it follows your respect level. If you respect it, then it generally is a very euphoric, very, very positive thing. You get these sensations or these experiences that are very positive. Like one person would see, believe it or not, would be sitting there, and they would see like a very, very ancient Indian chief would sit down and recite to them, and then they would write it on a piece of paper, and then wake up a half an hour later, hours later, and find that they had this writing on a piece of paper that they never understood, or they had to go get it a translator to translate. Very positive, and it turned out to be very positive. But on the other hand, if you're disrespectful to this phenomena, you end up being very bad, and it could be a situation where I've had situations with people where they said that they're just having a very, very hard time with life, and things are bad. They just always have this terrible feeling that they're being followed or things are bad. And they said we would start, every morning before they get up, they would do some prayer, or they would do whatever their religion tells them to do, and then that would eventually go away. And I want to preface that this is not just anecdotal things that they tell me. I pick these things up on the interpretation every single time that they tell me. There was a high correlation between all of a sudden all of the signals started dying down once they started realizing that there was something wrong going on. So you get this all this energy going, you get all these sensors bouncing up, and I don't mean like dangerously high, but more than just zero. They're just bouncing around. All of a sudden, we just die down, because they made peace with this thing, or however they wanted to explain it in their words.
I think
I think
go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to say, I think it has been well documented in history. If you take a sacred object from a sacred site, you're going to get some karma or some kickback. Because if you look at Howard Carter in King Tut's tomb and what happened to all the people surrounding that, how they died mysteriously and so on, they obviously weren't the right signature frequency DNA match to raid that tomb.
Yes. So, in the study that Michele and I did, we saw little snippets of that, right? Little pieces of that, little exposure to say, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that sounds very much like, you've done something bad. But it became very, very apparent that that's something that was part of this.
You were talking about riders and all the different forms of entities that could come and go. I think, in my perception, the type of technology that you have, if you were to put it in a high school environment where there's at least 400, 500 kids of various ages, at say ninth grade to 12th grade, that age group, you would have massive spikes every day validating the comings and goings of otherworldly things, entities, and have data points to prove it.
Absolutely.
Children are the most open channels out there, and it is the entities that prey upon those most open channels because they're unaware of how easy they can enter into fear and how fear can be used against them if it's a manipulating force. If it's a natural force that is using the law of co-creative, meaning you're co-creating with it, that positive energy goes. When you're not co-creating with it, you're in disharmony within it. And if there are other external consciousness entities that are not embodied, or other realmly type entities who are trying to manipulate people into a direction of experience for whatever reason, it will be detectable through the 400 and 500 individual unique experiences that could be measured by many monitors just posted in one room here or there.
Sure.
And it would give you the most validating data, in my perception.
And to just augment on top of that, one thing that I'm doing now is that saying that I'm going to go grab all the social media, because these kids, bam, 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 right? They're constantly talking. Grab all the things they're saying, like, I felt funny or whatever. All of these things, and marry them to those large spikes. And now it's like, wait a minute. Now I see what's going on. I see that there's an entity, that's forcing kids to do this, or prompting kids to do this and things like that. So that'd be a really interesting experiment with, but that's what we're trying to accomplish now in a much broader sense. Like, we're trying to get hundreds of people to, be on the network, grab the social media, grab all of the news feeds, all of that stuff, and try to come up with a better correlation of why these things are happening and what are they saying, whatever this experience is, what are they saying?
In our investigations, we did a number of haunting cases, and me and Stan have sat there and just threw out information back and forth, having these really intense discussions on what we thought was going on. And Stan says, has the best take on it. Stan, if you talk about the idea of energy and where those deceased people tend to go and how their energy latches onto other things.
Well, having done all of these different types of phenomenal investigations, the Bigfoot, the witchcraft, the UFOs, the orbs. Uh, so uh, those energies, even let's say like the Bigfoot thing, you know, we've come to realize that these are interdimensional beings. They're not something that's out there living in the forest. Like there are some people that have that idea, but John and I don't ascribe to that thought. In that, if this thing that people call Bigfoot was living in the forest, there would be evidence of that, and it would be very, very obvious going down to the scat that this thing would be leaving behind. That would be super obvious if it was living there full time in that environment. And we don't see the evidence of that. We think these things are an interdimensional being that comes in our world. People encounter and experience these things, and then all of a sudden they go back across that barrier to where they're no longer visible. And we really feel that a lot of these phenomena, even like the hauntings, obviously in one of the cases I dealt with, there was the phenomenon of what's known as an apport, where you have a physical object that would come in and appear. And in this case, it was coins. So in the original investigation, there's actually a total of 66 coins that materialized and appeared in that investigation. And these things would fall out of thin air, out of nothingness, into that office space. And so the coins were collected and recorded and photographed, and all of that data collected. But with the apport, the coins would hit and they would behave like a regular coin that you would flip out of your pocket. They'll hit, but when they finally fall over and land, they're landing all heads up. So out of all of the coins, and even to this day, the phenomenon still happens around me, and they still land heads up. So these things are there, and a lot of it, I know you're challenged with this because you do want, from a scientific standpoint, want to document everything about it. But like you said earlier, there's parts of that that's missing that don't fit within your normal understanding of these things, and it makes it a challenge. But it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Jim, another thing to correlate to your studies is I was told at a recent conference that I spoke at that they have come up with a mathematical algorithm that predicts time in the cosmos opening up at certain periods of the time of the day, and usually before dusk in the morning around the witching hour of 4:00 a.m. and then the evening time when these portals open, literally saying portals, and they're algorithming now and they're studying those. That's when the highest phenomena occurs within our world from the cosmos. And this came from an engineer who was on the speaking platform with me. And it was a really interesting thing to look at, that we can, take time and also correlate it to your studies.
Sure. Yeah. One of the things that I have another scientist that I work with, that kind of an astrophysicist type of person that is really smart, really great engineer, great physicist. The theory that we've been working on is that a lot of the things that happen to us that we're experiencing, the orbs and all these UFO sightings, it might be just a portal based upon some other civilization way out there, just kind of opening up a telescope and saying, what's going on over there. And It could just be this wormhole or something like that. And, I think humans are very, very, very focused on, we live in 3 dimensions and, well, actually 4 dimensions, but we live in 3 dimensions. We can't find ourselves out of those 3 dimensions. That's where we live. There's so many other dimensions available that it's very difficult. What's that?
part of humanity is we're actually 7-dimensional beings. We have 7 dimensions to create our locality through time, space, and consciousness. Beyond the 3 realms, there's spirit, time, space, consciousness, and then the 7 localities, the 7 frequencies that give you an Earth-based locality. There's a whole different set of physics and understanding when you are a solidified being of awareness. And you were talking about telescopes opening up. That's very true. It's called remote experiencing, where a being who understands higher consciousness can remote experience a localized time space
That's right.
event not in their reality.
Right.
We, as DNA instruments of experience, become very aware of that portal opening and a consciousness going, hello, what's going
Yep.
on here?
Yep. Absolutely.
We just don't know how to react to it because it's been taken from our culture over thousands of years. That ability to have that connection has been stripped away by
Sure.
the modern industrialization process.
Right. And we've
Well, a
been led
lot
to
of
believe
people,
that. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
a lot of people think that time is linear. It goes from point A out to infinity, and
That's
so
right.
we're traveling along that line. I kind of like Doctor Who's uh, theory on that when he says it's this wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff. Um, and it is. I mean, it could be circular, like a record player that skips every now and then. It could be like a big ball of string. Uh, we just don't have the grasp in our brains to actually look at it. Just like if you were to look at the infinite out there, just in our universe, and see all the galaxies out there,
Sure.
we're just starting to get a peek at it. But
Yeah.
it's not the whole thing. And I think if you saw the whole thing, you just go nuts because it's too much for your brain to comprehend.
Absolutely.
So if you say that there are 7 and we only live in 3, don't you think nature has
Yep.
always taken up every spot it could take up? So
Yep.
I'm sure that it went for those last 4 and took advantage of it.
Yep.
And like you can't hold life back. You can't
Yeah.
hold things back.
Right. And linear time philosophy is a philosophy. Before Roman numeral time and clocks took over towns in the mid 1500s, town clocks everywhere telling everyone the time, everyone followed their sidereal time, your lunar based time, your localized relation to the sun and the moon and the position of your unique time. So that means everyone had their own unique frequency of
Sure.
time. And linear time took over the perception
Mhm.
and the philosophy, hijacking us away from our natural living.
Interesting.
Which changes our environment, right?
Changes the whole
Whole
perception.
perception
And
of who we
perception
are.
and perspective are the key to changing our ability to see the unlimited potentials as even the slightest potential of unlimited versus the limited reality of linear time defining everything.
So can I, if you want, I'm going to expand on that thought a second. This whole you enter the environment, you change the environment. And so that's a theory that has been in the back of my mind for many years. And how do you prove that? And so I believe that we are amazing antennas. We bring in a lot of things, but if you know anything about engineering, you know that antennas just don't receive, they transmit.
Yes.
Any antenna you have, it could look the most amazing thing. It's also a transmitter.
Yep.
So why are we not trained? If somebody was the ability to have, if there's an experiencer that had the ability to receive these experiences and receive sensations, why can't they then manifest those exact
They
same
do.
and project them out? So
They
the
do.
question is,
Remote
how do you prove that scientifically?
Mhm.
remote viewing has been done by the military since the mid 60s. Long before that, the Knights Templar did it. Long before that, the Scottish Freemasons did it. Long before that, any of the ancient mystery schools did it in a different form. Now, you want to know how do you detect it? Well, there are some of the remote viewer guys who actually talk about how do you detect photons in action. And it has been done and has been proven. It's just not widely shared.
Hmm. So
So,
what?
does a remote viewer send photons through time and space nonlinearly? Yes. How does one measure a nonlinear experiment? That's the big question. And it has been solved in those other communities. But from where we're at, with the limited perspective in science that we have to deal with, how can one generate a double blind experiment to prove nonlinear interaction?
So I think that I have an inroads into that. So one of the things that you have to remember that if there are many, many people out there that have these devices, and the devices is always measuring all of the signals, everything all day long, and getting their experiences. So what the study that I created in order to prove this is that I'm going to take a group of these, say, 50 of these people that all sign up to say, yeah, I want to be involved in this study to see if there is some information going back and forth. So one experiencer would then pick another experiencer anywhere in the world and intent on that experiencer. So give them the opportunity and have statistical the way to look at it in a very statistical manner to say I'm going to intent on that experiencer for a period of time, like maybe 2 or 3 seconds, and really focus on them. And then at the same time, since the system is connected to all of these devices and those 2 devices, let them see if there's any kind of significant change that is normal for that particular person. And now you've actually linked the 2. And then if you can do this over enough people.
Entangled observer.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Entangled observer experience, yes. But there's also another concept, unentangled observer. And this is a completely spiritual perspective that I've come to learn from my own journey and from my own level of communication with non-physical beings. Non-physical beings can be an unentangled observer.
Sure.
And what is an unentangled observer? Something that doesn't have an agenda in this reality, in our linear reality. It may have an agenda in its nonlinear observational process, but it isn't influencing the data itself.
Sure.
Now,
Yeah.
the key here is the cross communication and review of the data. As soon as one's entangled, there should be a way to detect it through the data. Is it done live detection or is it done afterwards?
Well, yeah. See, that's the interesting problem because there is, if you look at a lot of these things, you can intent on somebody, but the intent doesn't actually travel to them in the local time frame. So there is that complication. But if you, of course, everybody's blind. Nobody knows this is going on except the intenter, the person that is intenting on the other person knows, but he doesn't know who the intentee is. So you kind of cover all that up. So you bring all that statistics out. But that really is a good point. I think Feynman was one of the physicists that showed that you can't, on the world line, you really can't know where you're going to intend to. It could be that person could receive that an hour later or milliseconds later or whatever, depending on where they are.
Or if the correlator of the data was the unentangled observer, seeing the data as the raw data without any attachment to its outcome. Yeah.
That's why you hope that a computer can't be.
Yes,
it's not a sentient object.
Right.
Or you want it to be you want it to be an unembodied sentient object that can give you a perception and perspective that can help greater pattern recognition.
Sure.
Yeah, there's. I'm gonna throw a wrench in and change the subject. Somebody has made a comment about vibrating and this vibration that came upon them. And I kind of wanted to address that really quick, that a lot of times we are not grounded. When you're working with electronics, you put a strap on, you ground yourself because you have energy in your body, these electrons that can come out, static electricity, and it can zap your project and completely ruin it. So you ground yourself. We are not grounded today. We wear insulating rubber tennis shoes and insulating, shoes that keep us from connecting to the ground. when we sleep, we're still insulated. And so we are composed of energy. And, they mentioned that when they held some clay, that some of that went away. Well, um, what I would suggest is go outside, take your shoes off, go stand in the dirt and get grounded for 15, 20 minutes. And it really helps. And you can buy these grounding mats uh, that plug into your ground system on your outlet and put your bare feet on them. You can even get some. I have one that actually goes on the foot of my bed that my feet sit on there, so I'm grounded at night. Um, Otherwise, all that energy just builds up in us, and it can actually be harmful. So,
I agree.
I just thought I'd mention it as a PSA.
Well, so I think it's important to tell you guys that so I collected data for 3 years from many people, and I not only collected the data in the environment, but I collected their thoughts every single day. And if you look at the way the number of times the word vibration comes into those anecdotal daily messages, it's just absolutely amazing. It's like almost, I would say 50% of the things people type in, it was all about the vibrations and things like that. So, and I just got one the other day. We ended the study about a year ago, less than a year ago. It just kicked it off again because so many people were like, you can't stop now. You have to keep going. You don't have enough data yet. So I kicked it off again. Devices are back out to people. So they're starting to get this. And then now I start seeing the anecdotes coming in. And it's like, I felt this vibration, the vibration that I've been feeling since I was, a teenager. And it happened last night. And then if you look at the data that's coming through there's some physical things happening in the environment. There are actual physical signals that are happening at the time where they say something bad's going on. So,
and understand
it's not crazy.
When I'm talking about grounding, I'm talking about physical grounding. There's also spiritual grounding, and we can't ignore that. So, the UK trip is going to focus on spiritual grounding, amongst other things, and healing. Um, so, I'm quite uh, um, excited to go and try some of that myself. But there's a lot going on. We just don't understand it. I was saying earlier that we are composed of energy. Energy can't be destroyed. It can change state, but it can't be destroyed. And when people die, sometimes that energy attaches to inanimate objects, which is why if you bring something back, things happen because you brought some of that energy back, that negative energy. And me and Stan are always talking about it in terms of positive energy and negative energy. And,
Well, that gets into this whole thing that, one of the other theories that have been part of this whole thing is this whole idea of hitchhikers. You can't, this energy, and you said exactly what we thought it is. It's an energy that you can't destroy, but it could be displaced and be put on something else. And that is the essence of what we feel is the whole hitchhiker thing. So somebody would go to an area, experience something. They would then, it's almost like potential energy, it's all this potential sitting inside of them. They would then come home, their family members would interact with them. They would then get picked up. The energy would then flow to them. And then they would start having experiences and start having all of these things happening. And also the bad stuff. So people would come home and they would start getting blood diseases. They would have, very physical things manifesting that are sometimes good, sometimes bad. And you could say, well, that's kind of anecdotal. That really doesn't make any sense. There are so many instances of that you can't ignore it. It just statistically, it says, you can't just ignore it. It's got so much data on it.
Back to natural.
Here you can get into a very interesting correlation to that kind of energy. kinetic energy. So you can even move objects with that energy once it's stored. And so we look at that as a phenomenon. When it's stored energy, that person might have that ability to move or levitate or whatever. This energy is on display, so it builds up. And so we look at people, all of a sudden it transfers to a object and non-living object, and then we call that kinesis. And so that has to be studied too. Are we the generators causing that type of electrical system for other things to happen? So I have to look at that.
Maybe that's right. Michele, you might have hit it on the head. So what if we are just collecting all these little tidbits of energy and we're grabbing them, and then of course that then manifests itself somehow in our head, but that then spills off into other areas, other people, things like that. I mean, so maybe, and the energy doesn't have to be sinister or bad. Energy could be very positive. So maybe we're collecting this constantly. We just don't realize it. It's part of us. Very interesting.
We are collectors of experiences. That is what life is.
Right.
We're also the manifestors of our own experience through our choice of free will. And there are times where we think we are a non-free willed choice. But free will is the bigger spiritual experience here. And the level in which we can exercise it with a freedom in our heart and a connected, grounded experience, just like Jonathan was talking about. Feet on the ground and spirit in your feet on the ground. Unified with that experience of free will, of positive interaction with the reality.
And overriding the adrenals and going to that heart-spaced awareness.
Well, I think we're just getting in touch with a lot of this understanding, just scratching the surface on understanding. We think today that we're something special because we've done surgery in this country for 200 years. Chinese have been doing it for 10,000 years. We think we're really something because we have a digital watch, and we built that thing. And yet there's technologies out there that we can't even grasp. It would be like us trying to explain how to construct a digital watch to an earthworm. The understanding just isn't there. I really think that our ancestors had a better idea of how all these things work. And, we like to think, oh, they were cavemen, they went, ugh, and, bashed women over the head and dragged them back to the cave by their hair, or they were like the Flintstones. But I think they were very, very sophisticated and cultured civilizations of their day that had so much information that we just can't even grasp today.
Do you think it's possible? I just want to throw this question out because the question I've been asking myself, are we our worst enemies because we went through, from when we were born, we went through schools, we went through our parents, we went through colleges, and we just got programmed to do certain norms in our society. But back 1,000 years ago, they didn't have all that. They had very strict norms. They didn't have all the technology and all the laws and all this kind of thing. That's why they were more open and susceptible to understanding this thing, because they didn't have all those filters, those terrible filters that we get in our heads that allows us not to have imaginations and prevents us from doing the things that they did 1,000 years ago and that we can't possibly conceive of.
Well, I think they did have those technologies, but I think that there was more of a closer relationship to nature and really the universe than that connection that we have today. I think they had interaction with beings that were so far advanced of us today that we can't even remotely imagine those technologies, but they were interacting with these beings, controlling craft and things of that with just thought, and they were exposed to that. But today we don't, like John said, we don't imagine that they were that far advanced, our ancestors.
When you
You
think
know,
about all
I,
those
Jim, I,
petroglyphs everywhere that show
yeah,
people talking to these entities, there's
Yes,
so many you can't ignore them. I mean, it's like ridiculous to ignore them. So I'm
I,
sorry,
true.
Michelle, I cut you off.
no, you're fine. I think what we're speaking into, I think, without the technology we know today, because it's clouded our brain, our judgment, the frontal, whatever, the reptilian side of ourselves, we have learned norms. And I think thousands of years ago that we were the gift. I think we understood our gifts. I think we understood our abilities. And we worked with technology, and I think they went side by side. I think we worked with the technology with who we were with the gifts, whether they're mystical gifts, that we work together with technology, and it doesn't exist anymore like the way it used to be, the ancients. And you hear all these speculations of, the pyramids being an energy source that worked with energy and so on and so forth. I think that we have lost the ability to connect to technologies, to your point and your questions. And now we're trying to find a way back to spirituality in order to work again with those technologies, but it's been obfuscated by, like you said, by our developments in with
Yeah, sure.
education and how it should be, not how it was.
The forced
And the global
traumatization,
narrative.
Yeah.
the forced traumatizations of modern society, compartmentalizing imagination to be limited. And without imagination, we can't achieve the next level. When am I not imagining it? And is it real? Just like in your meditation or anybody that's having any form of otherworldly communication, at what point am I not making this shit up? And you've passed the critical mass of awareness going, it's real. And the forced traumatization is forced evolution, which is where we are at as humans, not a natural co creative evolution with the world we live in. Forced evolution is going to take the narrow path of expansion of awareness and not the wide, broad path of unique experiences that define our perspective, that influence our perception of how the multiverse works or the layers of reality around us.
Interesting. Very
And the global narratives replaced our oral teachings.
Yep.
and
A
and
global
really,
narrative.
materialism and greed and these kind of things have taken mankind down another path, as opposed to staying true to the nature of respect of each other and the betterment of mankind.
Yeah.
You know
And
what's
everyone
funny?
to hold those truths is self evident.
You know what's interesting? The advent of AI.
Mm,
So you say, well, AI could be a sentient object, and you say that AI could
right.
maybe not have all of those problems that humans have and all that stuff. But the problem is that we're the ones that are creating AI, so we're going to create our own image. So we're just going to create that all over again, but in another way. So it's
There's
I
another
agree.
way. There's another way to see it. If we are truly seven locality based frequencies of dimension and not on a linear time, AI was sent here to help us create our change. So AI could be created in the future, which is a coexisting being making our reality simplistic.
that's very possible. That's very
Or
possible.
we may have Skynet right around the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
to me, AI is completely being misunderstood. It should be a helper, an educator of people, and not a replacer of jobs. But it is the free market economy that's trying to drive jobs and prices and the bottom line and the bean counters, forcing a technology into something that was never meant to be. AI should
There,
be your personal educator.
there are those individuals among mankind today that want to exploit AI for those very things, and that's what makes it dangerous.
Yep.
Sure.
To the point, what Dr. Segala was suggesting. But then again, when does it come back to us as being responsible participants in our own creations, according to what Dr. Segala is studying with his, we are the creators of those environments, whether we're trying to connect to the cosmos, entities, Sasquatch, so on and so forth. We create those worlds. Not in a delusional state. I just think we're dealing with vibration here of frequencies, and we're trying to come to an understanding of all that, based on programs like his, and being Native American, we're out there. We have had these teachings. Is how do we get these teachings out there? Because it is a part of our DNA. It is a part of your DNA. I'm not just saying just natives. Natives just seem to be aware of their DNA in this modern day, and
because it's their legacy.
this is our legacy. And not only that, people are looking for solutions in the world for the chaos that's going on in our world today. So Dr. Segala's technologies are just proving up that this thing exists, that these things exist within ourselves. And I'm appreciative of that program.
And once we're consciously aware that we create our own reality, then we have to step in with the responsibility for creating our own reality.
And we have to
And
ask,
what are we going to create?
we have to ask, now what?
Yeah, that's a great
All the
point.
time. Now that we know it, now what? What's the plan? Because we can't remain on the no plan for our future anymore.
No.
There has to be a clear, concise plan where we constantly go, now what? And use our ability to expand our awareness. And Lillian in the chat for us remind me of one of our teachings, the precognitive workforce. Guides and guardians and pieces and aspects of yourself are working to better your future, making it a clear road of observation if you should tune in to the other aspects of the other realms, trying to influence you into right path, right action, right heart space versus fear, envy, and resentment, shame, blame, or guilt.
Well, it's like having a living document where you constantly try to better that, as you move into the future. You try to eliminate or replace those things that no longer serve a positive purpose or whatever. And you're constantly striving to better it, to create a better version of that, that's more inclusive, to others and the thinking of others and ideas of others, and keep moving forward.
Yeah. Working on that impeccable nature of goodness.
Yeah.
So Jim, what is your future plans, and what do you do with the information that you collect and in your studies of this? What's for the future for mankind, for your participants as well?
So what the goal is now is that, we did 3 years. We came up with some really good information. We saw a lot of patterns. So now I'm going to put that in a context where I say, I'm going to continue to grab all this data from all these people, give them the ability to interact, do all these kind of things. But now I want to open it up to any scientist to say, if you have a particular way or you have a theory that will move the dial a little bit to say, if you, at some point, if they come up with a theory that is viable and the participants like it, give them the ability to grab that data in the way they want to come up with their own studies. There's no way that I could come up with all the studies. I came up with 2 and I was very satisfied with them, but now I say I'm not smart enough to be able to do everything. And I want to take it and open it up to any scientist, as long as they adhere to, we want to do it for the people, it's it's open, it's all that kind of stuff. Then, I really want to open this up to let other scientists do it. And that's how science works, right? Science is an incremental thing. You do one, somebody gets a little smarter, and then, so now I've got all this data and I've got all these devices. I want to open it up to people to experiment on it and come up with their own conclusions.
We'd love to take your science and integrate it into our kits, and have people have the experience and gather information to help your program and our program to understand, what we're doing out there in the field. Is it making a change? Are we going to create a form of data that's
Sure.
going to help science move this forward, that the spiritual meets science, and it's all correlated. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah, I think that we need to create a critical mass of people in order to start really understanding some of these things and being able to get a whole community out there. So, I mean, one of the things that I've been doing is that I have this watch that you wear that also has the same abilities as the other one. So it captures all the environmental data. It allows you to do something, or this little puck that sits in your pocket. So now I've gone from things that have to be in your environment to things that just have to be on your person at that point. And they're very inexpensive. But again, it's all, can I sense the things that are happening to an experiencer in a way that I can allow them to understand what's going on with their lives.
That's cool.
And then integrate that into a Paranormal Training Academy.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. In the kit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
else?
really enjoyed this session. I really enjoyed it, especially having you, Dr. Segala, as a guest. Thank you for Michele, Andrew, Laura,
Thank you.
for making that happen. I really enjoyed it, and I think our audience has enjoyed that too.
Yeah, great to see you guys pursuing this and boots on the ground doing things about it. It's a big subject, but there's a lot of places that people can move that dial, and that's what we're all trying to do.
Oh yeah.
With that said, we're going to come to an end of the show. Dr. Segala, you want to give a way for people to get a hold of you?
I believe there's a website that you can get a hold of me. There's a survey on the website designed by Dr. Kit Green and Dr. Colin Kelleher that tries to understand, is medical history something that, does medical history provide evidence that there is some kind of unique disease for an experiencer?
Yeah.
And to be able to understand more about that, is it something that's an autoimmune thing? Or so they developed this questionnaire. It's very short. If people would like to take it, I mean, it's really just, it's all about it. There's no information that would ever transfer. There's no HIPAA information. So they designed that. It's on the site if you guys want to take a look at that and just answer the questions and give your comments.
And your website is experiencer-studies.com.
Yes, that's correct.
Right there.
Yep.
Okay. And a reminder, everyone, the Paranormal Rangers have their first paranormal training coming up in York, UK. There is a website here, Combined Healing Therapies, at andrewbartzis.com. You can go and sign up there just for the paranormal training or the healing that comes after it for the multi-day experience. You will get 2 days of in-class training with all the pieces of technology, a thermal cam, night vision goggles, a tri-field meter, and a body camera with a 4K sound and 4K video also, for you to learn how to use, change, and work with your daily practice, your daily environment, and how to integrate those tools with an investigative process, creating your personal investigation into your personal journey, whether it's dealing with the paranormal experiences in your local environment or expanding your awareness of just what the heck is out there. That'll be August. Sorry, Laura, what is the dates again?
April. So for the paranormal, it's April the 20th to the 23rd inclusive. So that's 4 days. 2 days in seminar and then 2 days out in the field, including 2 evenings in the back streets of York around the haunted places. And I think one evening's an actual tour, and the next evening we're actually in one very haunted building.
Where you get to use all of your pieces of technology that you will be able to take home with you.
Sweet.
Yeah. Any last words, Stan or John or Michele?
I just want to say thank you for everybody. Thank you for everybody that posed questions today and were visiting, the site today. And thank you for that. Thank you for each of you that were a part of this. Dr. Segala, Michele, John, Andrew, and Laura. I appreciate all of your input, and it's really exciting to work with you guys. Thank you.
Nice to be here.
All right, guys, wonderful. We will be back next Wednesday for another Native Paranormal Crossroads. All right, Joel, take us away.
Thank you.